I never thought I'd be the person calling the police on my own mother, but when she lunged at a group of teenagers with a kitchen knife, just because they offered my younger brother a slice of pepperoni pizza, I knew the protection had turned into something much darker. I'm sitting here in my car, hands still shaking, watching the flashing blue and red lights reflect off the windows of the house I grew up in, wondering if I've just destroyed my family or finally saved what's left of it. She's screaming that I'm a traitor, that I'm letting the filth of the world infect our bloodline, and that I'll regret this until the day I die. But looking at my 10-year-old brother, Leo, huddled in the back of a squad car with a look of pure relief instead of terror, I have to ask you guys, was I wrong for finally breaking the cycle, or would you have let your mother's obsession turn into a literal crime scene before stepping in? To understand how we got to this point, you have to understand the glass cage my mother built. My name is Sarah, and for 24 years, I lived under the rule of a woman who viewed the outside world not as a place to live, but as a biological weapon aimed directly at her children. Growing up, I wasn't allowed to go to birthday parties because of unregulated germs and sugar-induced hyperactivity. I was homeschooled until university, and even then, she tracked my GPS every second I was on campus. But while I managed to move out and gain some semblance of a life, my little brother Leo wasn't so lucky. Leo is 10, and in my mother's eyes he is a fragile porcelain doll that will shatter if he breathes air that hasn't been purified by the 4 industrial-grade filters she has running in every room. He isn't allowed to play sports because of concussion risks. He can't have friends over because people bring bedbugs and bad influence. And he has never, not once, eaten a meal that wasn't prepared by her hands. The tension started peaking last month during the neighborhood's annual block party. It's the one day a year where the cul-de-sac transforms into a paradise for kids, bouncy houses, music, and the smell of barbecue everywhere. Leo was standing at the window, his forehead pressed against the glass, watching the neighborhood kids play capture the flag. My mother was standing behind him, literally narrating the dangers. She'd point at a kid falling down and say, "See? That's a staph infection waiting to happen." Or point at the ice cream truck and mutter about poisonous dyes and corporate greed. I happened to be visiting that day, and I couldn't take it anymore. I told her she was suffocating him, that he's 10 years old and needs to skin his knees and eat a burger once in a while. She turned on me with a look of such pure, cold vitriol it made my blood run cold. She told me I was compromised, and that she wouldn't let me ruin her last chance at a perfect, healthy son. I stayed the night, hoping to ease the tension, but things only got weirder. She has started locking Leo's bedroom door from the outside at night for his safety, claiming she heard suspicious people roaming the streets. When I confronted her about the fire hazard, she screamed that I was trying to kidnap him. The air in that house felt thick, like we were all drowning in her paranoia. The next morning, I saw Leo sneaking a peek at a comic book a neighbor kid had slid under the fence a few days prior. It was just a silly superhero story, but when my mother saw it, she didn't just take it away. She burned it in the kitchen sink while making Leo watch, telling him that fictional violence leads to a fractured soul. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just overprotection anymore. It was psychological warfare. The obsession wasn't just about physical safety. It was about total mental dominance. She began checking Leo's fingernails every hour, scrubbing them with a harsh chemical wash until his cuticles were raw and bleeding, claiming that unseen parasites were nesting there. I tried to tell my dad, who was working his engineering job in the Middle East, but she always got to the phone first. She would tell him I was struggling with delusions, and that I was trying to break apart the family because I couldn't handle the responsibility of excellence. She created a narrative where she was the only one standing between us and total annihilation. I remember one specific Tuesday where Leo dropped a glass of water. It was a simple accident, something any 10-year-old would do. But to my mother, it was a sign of neurological degradation caused by the impure air I had let in when I opened the front door for 2 seconds. She made him sit in a dark closet for 4 hours to reset his senses, claiming that sensory deprivation was the only way to heal a mind poisoned by the outside world. I sat outside that closet door, whispering to him through the wood, promising him that I would get him out. He just cried quietly, asking if the germ monsters were real. That broke my heart more than anything else. To make matters worse, she began implementing what she called the protocol. This was a set of rules that governed every second of Leo's day. He had to wake up at 5 a.m. for a full-body inspection under a UV light. Every mole, every freckle, every tiny scratch was logged in a leather-bound journal. If he had a red mark from sleeping on his arm, she would spend 3 hours researching rare skin cancers and forcing him to drink bitter detox teas that made him nauseous. I found out later she was putting small doses of laxatives in those teas to flush the toxins, which only made him look paler and more sickly, feeding back into her belief that the world was killing him. She had even replaced all the light bulbs in the house with specific wavelengths that she believed stimulated cellular repair, turning the entire home into a ghostly, blue-tinted hospital wing. I felt like I was walking through a sci-fi horror movie every time I visited. One afternoon, I caught her standing over him while he slept, just staring at him with a look of such intense, possessive hunger that I had to leave the room to keep from screaming. She wasn't loving him. She was consuming him. She had convinced herself that the only way to be a good mother was to be a god, controlling the very air he breathed. She started talking about how the air outside is getting thicker with lies, and how they were watching our house through the smart meter. I tried to gently suggest she talk to a professional, but she accused me of being an agent of the state, sent to dismantle her sanctuary. It was becoming clear that her mind was a labyrinth of conspiracy and fear, and Leo was trapped at the very center of it. I decided to plan a fun day for Leo while she was supposed to be at a doctor's appointment. I told her I'd watch him, and the second her car pulled out of the driveway, I took him to the local park. You should have seen his face. It was like he was seeing color for the first time. We went to the playground and he was hesitant at first, touching the plastic slide like it might burn him. Within 10 minutes, he was running, laughing, and actually interacting with other human beings. A group of kids from his old homeschool co-op happened to be there having a small pizza party. They called him over, being genuinely sweet, and offered him a slice. Leo looked at me, eyes wide, and I nodded. He took a bite of that pizza like it was a gift from the gods. He was smiling, actually glowing, and for a second, I felt like a good sister. But then the shadow fell over us. My mother hadn't gone to the doctor. She'd doubled back because she felt a disturbance in her spirit. She pulled her SUV onto the grass of the park, honking the horn like a maniac. She jumped out, screaming at the top of her lungs that those children were poisoning her son. She didn't just grab Leo, she started shoving the other kids, knocking the pizza box out of their hands and stomping on it. When one of the parents tried to intervene, she lost it. She reached into her massive emergency bag she carries everywhere and pulled out a long, serrated bread knife she'd taken from the kitchen. She started swinging it wildly, telling everyone to stay back from her clean son. The sound of her screaming was unlike anything I've ever heard. It was the sound of a person who had completely detached from reality. She was calling the other parents vultures and vectors of disease. The children were crying, the sun was shining, and there was my mother, the center of a nightmare. This is the point where I had to make the hardest decision of my life. I saw the terror in the eyes of those other parents and the absolute trauma breaking across Leo's face. I saw my mother, a woman I once loved, looking like a literal monster. So, I grabbed Leo, threw him into my car, locked the doors, and dialed 911. While the operator was on the line, my mother started banging on my car window with the handle of the knife, screaming that I was a child trafficker and that she would save Leo from me. She was clawing at the glass, her eyes bloodshot and wide, yelling that she would cut the sin out of me if I didn't open the door. Leo was curled in a ball on the floorboards, covering his ears, sobbing so hard he couldn't breathe. I had to stay calm for the dispatcher, describing the weapon and her location, while my own mother tried to break into the car to potentially hurt us both. It was the longest 4 minutes of my existence. So that's the situation I was in, and I had to make a choice. Before I tell you what happened next, I want you to pause and comment below what you would have done in my shoes. The police arrived in less than 5 minutes, but it felt like an eternity. They had to taser her because she refused to drop the knife, claiming the officers were counterfeit and sent by her enemies to steal Leo's organs. It was the most horrific thing I've ever witnessed. As they loaded her into the ambulance for a psychiatric hold, one of the officers asked me to help him identify the items in her bag to see if there were any other weapons. What we found was worse than a knife. Inside were dozens of pre-filled syringes. When we later got the lab results back, it turned out she had been DIY compounding calming sedatives out of crushed up over-the-counter sleep aids and herbal tinctures, which she had been planning to start injecting into Leo to keep him docile and safe at home. She had already bought the medical-grade restraints. She wasn't just protecting him from the world. She was preparing to turn our home into a private prison where he would never have to, or be able to leave. The depth of the horror didn't stop there. When the detectives searched the rest of the house, they found that she had been recording Leo's every movement through hidden cameras in the vents. She had notebooks filled with deviance reports, documenting every time he showed a spark of independence or curiosity. She had even been intercepting my letters to him for years, replacing them with forged notes saying I was too busy with my new better life to visit him. She had systematically isolated him until she was his entire universe. The police also found a travel itinerary to a remote cabin in the woods that she had purchased under a false name. She was planning to take him there permanently, away from the corrupting influence of even the suburban neighborhood. She was going to disappear with my brother and keep him sedated in a basement until he forgot who he was. In the basement of our own home, they found a room that had been soundproofed with heavy foam. There was a single bed, a small table, and a bucket. She had already begun moving his things down there. She was going to move him into that dungeon the very night of the park incident. I felt a cold chill run down my spine, realizing that if I hadn't taken him to the park that day, he might have disappeared into that basement forever. The realization that I almost lost him to a life of chemical fog and isolation made me physically ill. I found her master plan hidden in a floorboard, a 200-page manifesto about how children are pure vessels that are shattered by the touch of society. She wrote about how I was a broken vessel, and how she had to seal the leaks in Leo. The level of premeditated cruelty was staggering. She had even looked into how to surgically disable his vocal cords, so his impure thoughts wouldn't manifest as speech. My father, who has been working overseas and was largely oblivious to the extent of her decline, flew back immediately. He's devastated, but he's standing by me. We've managed to get Leo into intensive therapy, and he's staying with me for now. The first week was the hardest. He wouldn't eat anything I didn't taste first. He would sit in the corner of his room, staring at the door, waiting for it to be locked from the outside. He had to be taught how to play again. I bought him a set of Legos, and he just stared at them for 3 days because he was afraid they were tainted. My mother is currently in a high-security psychiatric facility. She still calls me from the landline there, when she's allowed, to tell me that she hates me and that the germs will get me eventually. Some of my extended family members have actually had the nerve to tell me I overreacted, that a mother's love is fierce, and I should have handled it within the family. They think I've ruined her reputation over what they call a nervous breakdown. But they didn't see the knife. They didn't see the syringes. They didn't see the soundproof basement or the restraints. They didn't see the look in Leo's eyes when he realized he wasn't allowed to be a person. They haven't had to hold a 10-year-old boy while he shakes during a thunderstorm because he thinks the rain is acid sent by mom to punish him. Today, Leo went to a real school for the first time. He came home with a grass stain on his jeans and a story about a friend he made in art class. He's starting to heal, but the scars my mother left, both the invisible ones and the fear of the world she instilled, will take years to fade. We still have to deal with his night terrors, where he wakes up screaming that someone is trying to scrub his skin off, but slowly, the light is coming back into his eyes. He ate an entire chocolate bar yesterday without asking for permission, and though it seems small, it felt like a victory for his freedom. We are building a new life, one where the doors stay unlocked and the air is just air. My father has retired early to help me take care of him, and we're moving to a new state where the memories don't haunt every street corner. Leo asked me yesterday if he could join a soccer team. I almost cried as I said yes. I've realized that sometimes, the person who says they are protecting you is the one you need protection from the most. Love isn't a cage, and it certainly isn't a serrated blade or a hidden syringe. I've lost my mother, at least the version of her I thought existed, but I saved my brother, and I'd do it again 1,000 times over. I've had to accept that the woman who raised me died a long time ago, replaced by a ghost fueled by paranoia and control. But in her place, I have a brother who is finally learning how to breathe. It's a heavy realization to come to, but sometimes you have to burn down the house to save the people inside. I hope this story serves as a reminder to anyone out there who feels like they're being suffocated under the guise of protection. Trust your gut. Toxic behavior doesn't become okay just because it comes from a parent. This isn't just a story about a crazy mom. It's a story about the survival of a child who was almost erased. If you find yourself in a situation where love feels like a weight or a threat, please reach out to someone. Don't let the family-first narrative keep you in a dangerous situation. Like this video if you were on my side. Subscribe for more stories like this. Share your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comments section. Was she just a worried mom who snapped? Or was this something much more sinister? I'll see you all in the next story.